All right, good morning, and thank you, Google, for this later wake-up call on Saturday morning. It's really appreciated when a multinational corporation allows us to sleep in a little bit longer on a Saturday morning and just gives us that added bit of flexibility. Sometimes you think these big corporations are kind of like really strict and really time-bound, but it's really nice to know that Google today gave us a little bit of extra minutes to kind of relax and chill out.
Actually, it was Apple.
It was Apple. Oh, well.
Thank you, Apple.
Thank you, Apple. It just hasn't been the same since Steve Jobs kind of passed away. But thank you, Apple. Hopefully, we will find some improvements. And I hear there's all these articles about young Steve Jobs. So maybe if one of those guys steps in, you'll get back to the glory days. Anyway, we are here with the Daily Tick once again. I received further message confirmation, yes, from my father that indeed I am funny. So enjoy the meeting. We are going to have a funny political update, media update, and a general sentiment update of how the negotiations are going. We are on day 6 now. It's been a long week so far, and this is the last day of negotiations this week. We do expect negotiations to plow on throughout the night, and we do also expect some of the key issues to continue to be frustrating issues for the second week. I'm joined here with Ana Perez Catala from Barcelona, from Catalonia, and finally, potentially also sometimes has allegiance to Spain, but definitely not the European Union. And I am also here with Joshua Wiese, who is going to give us our political update and some of those key issues. As I mentioned just previously, some of the big issues that kind of potentially you've read about holding up the negotiations are some of the key issues that usually get talked about in the second week. And it is quite remarkable, regardless of how well or not well the negotiations are going in particular issues, just how much effort there is to try and tackle some of these deeper issues so early on in the week. And potentially that has really positive signals for the next week. Is that what you're feeling, Josh?
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Did your dad say you were funny? I thought he was a performance artist that specialized in make-believe. I think we should all consider the context of Chris's dad's talents. Yeah, so welcome everybody. It's Saturday morning. I don't know what you people are doing here. Normal people don't show up to work early on Saturday morning to read long texts. So we're in good company with lots of geeks. So thanks for coming. I think there's a general sense that progress is being made on the margins of all of these sort of key elements. In particular, we saw some good signals on loss and damage yesterday. Both the in the text itself that came out yesterday, we lost the sort of no text option for loss and damage. And then later in a press conference, Todd Stern, who's the U.S. lead negotiator, said that he was confident that we were going to land loss and damage in the final agreement. So those are two pretty good updates on something that's very important, especially for the most vulnerable communities around the world that could come out of the Paris Agreement, and I think that's positive. On another front, we know from everything that scientists have told us about our emissions trajectory, what it means for how the climate is changing, that we need to peak emissions in the very near term, next 5 years, and then quickly turn things in the other direction. And we also know that the majority of these discussions in Paris around the Paris outcome are about an agreement that starts, it only comes into force after 2020. So there's another piece of this, a smaller piece on near-term climate action, pre-2020 climate action. And the text on that is also looking good. Or at least a lot of the asks, a lot of the things that our partners have called for over the last few years and tried to develop to push pre-2020 climate action are in there on both fronts and really on every front. Every piece of these negotiations, there are cross-cutting issues. In particular, climate finance. I think I said it every day. Everybody said it every day. It's probably in every newspaper story about the top.
I think every newspaper story about the COP said something about 55 pages and 38 pages. Actually,
there's a little little bit of emphasis on the text.
It's as if no one reads books nowadays, so they think these page numbers are like, wow, 38 pages? Yeah. Man, that's way more than my high school teacher told me to read in a day.
On Kindle, what percentage?
I'm not sure.
Okay. We could move a lot faster if some of these finance questions were answered, and I think, especially on the pre-2020 climate action front, finance could be a really big deal in helping boost what we're able to do in the near term. A few things aren't looking so good. We've been pushing hard for a long-term goal that gets us to 100% renewable energy by 2050, zero fossil fuels by 2050, and we're probably, while there's still some good options in the text, and I think that what that means is this has been elevated to a level where discussions about decarbonization of the global economy have really never been at before. It's happening at the heads of state. There are serious options in the text. It's not looking like an easy path to get there by Paris. So in particular, 100% renewable energy by 2050. A lot of the energy poor countries they're big economies like China are pretty nervous about that. I think that the understanding of the importance of that issue, the level and depth of that debate has advanced quite a bit. And we saw that a little bit emphasized yesterday in a few announcements on the sidelines. In particular, the head of the Financial Stability Board, which is a body that's a pretty big deal for businesses, is setting up a task force to consider climate risk in the finance sector. So I think yesterday we saw a number of signals. I think it was a business theme day, and that meant that there were a lot of talks from investors and business leaders on what all of this means. We saw some pretty significant signals, including this one importantly from the Financial Stability Board, that investors are really here at this COP in Paris, for the first time, thinking in real concrete terms about the implications for the business community. So our long-term goal is our push for a long-term goal. The depth of that debate is making waves in the real economy. It's making waves in politics outside of the UNFCCC, and need for it to catch up here in this place and in this agreement, hopefully. We've talked before about another key piece of this, this idea that we need review and then we need cycles to scale up action, right? So I think everybody sitting in this room and a lot of you out there on the interwebs know that we have all these national climate action plans. They are basically putting us on a trajectory to a 3 to 4 degree world, and that's going to screw us, right? That's really bad news, especially for the most vulnerable countries. All the countries have agreed previously to limit global warming to 2 degrees, and a lot of countries, increasingly getting close to all of them, more than 100 now, have pushed hard to increase the ambition of that agreement to 1.5 degree limit, right? So we have this gap, and we need these. We know we're not going to change the INDCs in Paris. Countries aren't going to increase them here, but we need an architecture in Paris so that we can revisit those INDCs in regular cycles and ramp them up. An important piece of that is reviewing them at some point, maybe 2017, 2018. And there's some questions around how robust that review is. Is it just a stock take where we look backwards and we say, okay, this is what we've accomplished? Or is it forward looking? Is it actually like a review where we take a look at what we've accomplished, take a look at what plans we have, and we revise them upward, or at least think about what's necessary, what else we have to do. So I think there's a sense that there's the stock take language, the sort of review piece of this long-term architecture to increase the ambition of countries climate action plans is tough right now. Countries are comfortable maybe with a stock take, which is backward looking, looking at what we've accomplished. Not yet enough countries comfortable with a review that's forward looking. So that's something for civil society to push hard on. I think it's essential. Another piece of this is 5-year cycles. We've talked a long time about cycling up the ambition of mitigation actions, and then increasingly over the last few months, and here especially in Paris, we've talked about cycles of finance, so that we have the means to implement these mitigation actions, and cycles of adaptation action, right? So there's some confusion around like that 5-year figure, right? It's a little hard to say whether we're making progress. Seems like there's more acceptance around cycles and revisiting these plans, but not necessarily on 5 years anymore. That used to be more firm, and it seems like we're getting some pushback on these, especially from China and I believe the LMDC group generally. Few other pieces that I'm hearing about from people who are following this a little more closely and know and understand it a little better than I do. We are seeing some potential, not captured in the agreement, but in discussions, some potential movement on finance. It seems like the EU is getting more comfortable with this idea that $100 billion in annual climate finance is just a floor, and not, and so that we could maybe get language on that to push it up higher. We know that we need those numbers to increase after 2020. They and the U.S. and others, I think, are pushing back on this idea of cycles for finance in particular. There's a push by developed countries to be more inclusive in this sort of future climate regime that we're creating. And this has to do with kind of differentiation, right? Who's responsible for what? They want language around more countries being able to contribute to that pot of money, right? And not just basing this climate finance, who pays, who's a recipient, based on our old annex system from the 90s. So that's an issue. And I think it's pretty clear that just overall, we don't have confidence that all of these INDCs, all of these national climate action plans, most of them anyway, have a conditional piece. If finance is available, then we can get this far. And if we get that far, if all those are implemented, then we bend the warming curve down to 3 to 4 degrees, right? So we don't even have the finance on the table to bend that warming curve down to the inadequate sort of climate action plans, right? So finance is, again, really crucial here. And now just an update on kind of what to expect today, right? So it may have happened while we were talking, but we're expecting another version of the text to come out this morning.
Still coming.
Okay. And throughout the day, we're going to continue these ADP contact groups where negotiators are moving probably around the periphery of these sort of key pieces, maybe not able to tackle the big questions like differentiation and finance. And the goal is for them to finish their work and pass what remains up to ministers, where the COP president will take over. And from what I've heard, Fabio is extremely eager to take over. The French are frustrated with
Fabio.
Sorry, Fabio, the guy with the long hair and the model. Yeah. All right. So the COP president is extremely eager to take over. I didn't get much sleep last night. I'm sorry. And the French are pretty frustrated with the lack of progress here. That we haven't made more progress, and we're not down to just a few decisions. We have a lot of decisions, a lot of work for ministers to do, which is going to make getting a strong agreement harder. And I think that the COP plenary is scheduled for 6 p.m. tonight. So I think it's going to be a busy day, and then hopefully we can hand something off that's much improved with more clarity on the various options, as well as moving things closer to the more ambitious possibilities. And maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, That was great though, and it's really good to learn that Fabio's planning on stepping in quite soon and kind of really getting back to his action-packed days of the late '90s, right? Well, that was when that was big. But anyway, so look out for those issues and look out for some of those key kind of developments that Josh mentioned. We also heard this morning that there is kind of also some movement potentially on the idea of 1.5. It seems that we heard a report from our climate tracker from Venezuela that apparently Venezuela made an interesting statement agreeing with the idea of 1.5 this morning, but while saying that, mentioned also that they would wait for after the COP21 to release their climate action plan. So potentially that's a really earnest response, and that could be a real kind of game shifter if we got ALBA or OPEC countries, some of those aligned countries with Venezuela to come off on 1.5. Anna, you've been tracking 1.5 quite a bit. Do you think that we have kind of the building blocks to try and get that into the agreement, or obviously there was a bit of a fight on it during the week, and do you think that fight will continue and potentially block progress throughout the next week?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is that Europe is pushing for it, at least how I see it. So they are very keen on getting it into the agreement, and then I think it was ILAC who also stepped and say, yeah, we were also fine with that. So we are seeing more and more countries. I think it was 110 or 100, I don't remember. So that's majority. So yeah, I think the only ones pushing back will be India and the Arab countries. So they don't want to bend that emissions curve that far. So that is why they don't want to have the 1.5 thing.
And not all Arab countries. We heard from our colleagues yesterday that the Arab group is actually diverse in this role. So Saudi Arabia is lobbying hard to get the whole Arab group to move away from 1.5. But Egypt's president came and in his statement supported it. And we also heard that Tunisia, Morocco, Jordan are taking climate leadership within the Arab group. So this is really driven by Saudi Arabia, from what we understand. And it's frankly, it should be embarrassing to the Saudi kingdom and the royal family. It's counter to the way the world is moving.
All right, you said it, not me. Saudi Kingdom, Saudi royal family. If you're looking for anyone who did attribute you just then, you know where to turn to. So Josh, that was a really great update. I'm going to jump into the audience now and just see if we have any feedback from the audience. So many of you were tracking some of the key issues. I've turned to many of you during this week and kind of given you a bit of an update on what things have been doing and what has been happening. I'm doing this myself, by the way, guys. How are you doing? Nice to see you again. So who has been kind of tracking some of these key issues? Who's been focusing on the different countries? What's the update you have for us? What's your name first?
Gabriele Messori. So I just wanted to make a precision when you said that the no option text has been removed from Article 5. It has only been removed from the bridging proposal, not from the compilation text. So in the compilation text, the no text option for loss and damage is still present. Just to clarify that.
So still work to do to secure that. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see this morning that is moving even farther in a positive direction.
So for those people who aren't directly following that, could you kind of dive into that issue, explain it a little bit, and what potentially it could mean if it is or isn't included as we move forward?
I mean, the idea of loss and damage is to essentially have a mechanism to address climate change related damage that can be tackled by adaptation and mitigation. And there is already a mechanism on it agreed upon in Warsaw. And the big question in the run-up to this COP was whether to have a second mention of loss and damage in a specific separate article in the text, or whether to lump it with mitigation and essentially either not mention it at all or mention it only in passing. So the real question here is whether to have this Article 5 explicitly mentioning loss and damage as a separate article, or the no text option, i.e. Delete Article 5 altogether.
All right, great, and really interesting there. And I think I just saw an article highlighting potentially loss and damage is making some progress, at least in media coverage of the negotiations. But thank you for that clarification. Who else has been tracking a particular issue and want to give us an update on that? So I'm going to pass to Andreas now. Now, Andreas, Germany made, I guess, a bit of a headway earlier this week when they came out in support of 1.5, or at least kind of symbolic support of it. Is that something that is kind of really resonating within the European Union, or is that maybe a slip of the tongue that people are kind of worried about?
Well, I would first of all say that not necessarily the whole European Union is pushing for it. There are a bunch of countries pushing for it within the European Union. I think that's definitely something to support and something to work on, to kind of push those countries who are supporting it and also kind of work on those who are not supporting it yet. So I think that is critical. And if I think, especially of the German delegation, it was something that the head delegate of Germany, Mr. Flassbart, said. And as I heard yesterday, there was a kind of an urgent meeting of the German delegation actually discussing his move forward, as the Germans actually were not so happy about it. So, for example, if you just go to the pavilion, do that because there's free coffee. You see that actually the verdict is below 2 degrees. Like on every also on the free nuts you get there, you have below 2 degrees. Like this is really the wording they actually were pushing for. And I think like this might just have a thing that was maybe a bit more personal, maybe a bit more spontaneous by Mr. Flassbart. So I think there's still some work to do to really ensure that the European Union and Germany are pushing for a 1.5 target within the agreement.
Definitely, and while this 1.5 is not the only thing that's being negotiated here, obviously it has kind of follow-on effects to a lot of other areas of the negotiations, including loss and damage, including adaptation, and kind of all of the impacts that you otherwise would have to deal with if you kind of go towards 2. Obviously, the 2013-2015 review basically found that the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees means a lot of people have a lot of more problems in their lives, and especially those indigenous communities, small island countries, and most vulnerable people, and even some European cities. You know, if there's 1 meter sea level rise, it's probably not so good for Amsterdam, right? So it's something to look out for. We have a number of other people in the audience who I sometimes call on, and just here we have the UK YCC, and so you just heard from Germany about potentially some maybe kind of differences of ideas on. Okay, voice is gone. Seems like Jay had a lot of fun last night. Annabelle, you heard about Germany and differences of ideas, and he mentioned that potentially not all of the EU is behind this. What's the kind of the UK position on this, and where do you think some of the kind of differences in opinion within the EU lie?
So we had a meeting with our negotiators the other day, and they are still quite open and not pushing on the 2 degree 1.5 thing. We tried to push for 1.5. They weren't so keen. They're still pretty vague at the moment. We couldn't get too much information out of them. I don't know if Noelle or Clara want to add anything to that.
Were there any other issues you spoke about directly with them? Finance, adaptation? We have a direct update over here, so I'm just going to pass it along.
Just about the climate finance. They were saying that 100 billion would be a floor only if 2 conditions are respected, and that's transparency and meaningful mitigation. And if this is not respected, the 100 billion will not be a floor. So I think it's important to highlight.
Well, I think that transparency argument obviously goes both ways, and I think there's probably a lot of developing countries who might say the exact same thing, but just with a different intention. What do you think they're really looking for with regards to that transparency, and what do you think they consider meaningful? Because obviously we see in the media a lot of the time that there are some people who feel that developing countries are actually doing more than many developed countries in terms of mitigation. So what's your feel on what that kind of transparency or meaningful mitigation really could mean?
To be honest, I reckon it's just a legitimate reason to be able to say no to the 100 billion floor, that they actually have this. It was in Warsaw that they put this condition on, and if they can say people are not respecting it, they can find any loop in, and then they can say that they don't want to keep the 100 billion. But the UK has been really good on climate finance so far, so hopefully they won't use it against it.
All right. Is there anyone here from the other side of the fence? Anyone who believes that, developed countries should be the ones with more transparency and more meaningful mitigation? I'm guessing there's probably a few, but there's probably divided opinions. I'm going to turn on Diego now. So, Diego, you were kind of diving into the textual changes that we saw yesterday. Obviously, it was quite confusing for many negotiators. We had two texts that were released yesterday. One was called a compilation text. One was called a bridging proposal. What were the key differences between those two texts?
So basically, we had the bridging proposal, which is what the ADP co-chairs thinks might get through, and they've been working on the ADP bridging text. And they just released yesterday the text with highlights on sections made out of the ADP group, and we're expecting this text to be re-released today. What I've heard, like Sudan, just at the end of session yesterday, on behalf of the African group, spoke on about not having any text, but this text with comments from parties. So we can expect for today the bridging text from yesterday, but with comments and notes from parties, maybe as reference notes in the end.
Diego, we are hearing that ILAC is pushing to soften language on the global adaptation goal. Have you heard anything about that? Is it true, or do you have any background?
No, not really. And I have to ask them, but I know from last year they were really pushing for this goal. So I have no intel on this, and I'll ask them. I'll get this for the next LOTIC.
Thanks.
And Diego, just finally, we heard that Venezuela said that they were going to release the INDC after COP21. That's not the first Latin American country we've heard that from this week. You sat down with the Nicaraguan negotiators and discussed their kind of position on this. For those, is it 12 countries, right? Yeah. For those 12 countries that haven't produced an INDC so far, what do you think their feeling is? What do you think their kind of mentality is about why they didn't do it, and do you think we should expect those 12 countries to release? Obviously you can't speak for all of them, but maybe just about the ones that you do know about.
So I spoke with Nicaragua, and the leading void position is the voluntary responsibility is a path to failure. Like, he believes that having each country decide voluntarily how to reduce and how much to reduce, it's a path to failure. Even if we have, as Josh said, like reduce like from 4.5 to 2.7 through fine depends. Like, we reduce like a big chunk of the temperature goal. So he believes a small country and like countries not responsible for climate change, as he says it, shouldn't deliver the INDC because it's not their job to make it. And so we shouldn't expect from Nicaragua, from Cuba, and from Venezuela, I guess, either. Panama position, as far as I know, is also, like, they also have the INDC somewhere, or the roadmap, but they won't submit it up until like after Paris. So these guys, they want to build upon create a whole new process only based on historical responsibility, which I believe like by now it's a bit too late to begin a new process like at all. So we can expect like some trouble from other countries next week.
Well, speaking about Latin America, I'm going to kind of cross over here. We have Marcelo from Brazil. And obviously, we just got an update, basically a number of, I guess, Spanish-speaking Latin American countries. But Marcelo, you come from one of the other language-speaking countries in Latin America, and it seems to take up quite a big chunk of the continent and has quite a lot of influence here. With negotiations being so tight on differentiation, what do you think that Brazil could maybe do to try and kind of, I guess, bridge some of the gaps? In the past, Brazil's had a lot of interesting proposals around kind of cycles of differentiation and kind of slowly moving in. Do you think that they are going to be trying to, I guess, promote this position over the weekend and maybe early next week? Or are you kind of like not really sure if they're going to make a big move this week, and maybe Brazil is trying to sit back and kind of sit in the shadows a little bit more than they have in the past?
Brazil really supports the CBDR, the differentiations between parties, and I don't know if our government will make a big push next year about this, but this is a position that Brazil really supports, and they will not, I don't know.
In Brazilian media this week, is there a lot of people in Brazil kind of interested in the COP and interested in Brazil's position, or is it kind of passing unnoticed?
The Brazilian media is making a really good job. There are a lot of the great journals in Brazil are covering, making a good cover at the COP. But I think the population is not aware about what we are doing here. I think it's not it's a historical problem in Brazil that we have.
All right, well, I might pass over to one other Brazilian that I see in the audience very close by, Deborah. So, Deborah, do you think that Dilma right now is under a lot of pressure? Obviously, Francois Hollande is feeling the pressure of trying to kind of get this conference forward. A lot of people see Brazil as kind of like a middle player that can really shape a lot of the progress in the negotiations. But do you think there's a feeling in Brazil that they want to see Brazil help these negotiations forward and take some responsibility? Or do you think that the pressure isn't on for Dilma at the moment?
The political moment in Brazil is very it's confusing right now because we have several scandals related to corruption and related to financial matters in the government. So Dilma is under a lot of pressure politically from domestic issues, and I doubt that the climate talks are what's really on her mind right now. There was recently something around an impeachment request, so there's something really big happening there with the political situation domestically. And like Marcela said, climate change isn't really a big issue for the general population, so I don't think that pressure is being felt. But at the same time, I do think that the climate negotiators are very well prepared and will try to.
And recently Brazil kind of found some offshore oil that was kind of a big shift in, I guess, expectations and potential future economic plans. Do you think, I've heard previously that maybe that means that Brazil here isn't as progressive as potentially they would have been in previous years. Do you think that's playing a role, or have you not seen it yet?
I haven't seen the connection, but maybe it's something to do with this current government. There have been a few laws passed in the recent years that are not at all progressive, so I think it has something to do with the current government. I'm not sure about figures, to be honest, but there is a big potential. But it's like offshore oil that's way deep in the ground, and there's not really. I mean, it's not practical to explore it. So, although there was, when it was found, there was a lot of news about how it would change everything, and so far we haven't seen that impact.
Okay, thanks for that update. And I'm going to pass to Sharif now for our last kind of geographical analysis. So Sharif, you're from Egypt, and we've heard recently that the Arab group might be kind of one of the groups potentially slowing things down in a few different areas. We saw Saudi Arabia win a lot of, I guess, awards for being negative yesterday. Do you think that there are further divisions in the Arab group than other people are aware? And do you think potentially maybe some of the North African countries in particular might look to kind of separate themselves from Saudi Arabia, or do they still play a real controlling role in that group, and will they still continue to influence for the next week?
During the previous status that all Arab countries that they are taking, Saudi Arabia was kind of leading all things and trying to stop all intentions to invest in renewable energy and so on. And as we can see that some of Arab countries like Morocco, Tunisia are doing a great job and they're having a great plan. And especially yesterday after Saudi Arabia getting the fossil. So we decided today morning to do an action, and as a civil society, Arab civil society organization, we are asking Arab governments to go and investing 100% renewable energy by 2050, and we visualize the idea of negotiations that they are trying to stopping the negotiations or blocking it and keeping all other Arab countries away. So during the action in morning, for example, some of Emirates delegations passed by and they asked us, so why are you voting Emirates on behalf of Arab groups, and as we are doing a great job here and so on. So we asked them, yes, it's a time to move forward and show your intentions and take other positions far away of Saudi Arabia and so on. So that's for now.
And one of the big goals, I guess, of the Fossil of the Day Awards is to try and raise media attention in the countries in which we receive the Fossil of the Day in particular. I'm guessing it didn't get a lot of coverage in Saudi Arabian media, but do you think in some other Arab countries there was a bit of coverage and maybe that's making an influence, or are you kind of too early to tell?
I think it's now it's our role as a civil society organization and as a youth to use all of these media and all of things that happening here to share it with our colleagues and other people in our countries to starting to lobbying and pushing the negotiations forward and achieve progress. Especially first week is almost done. It's done already by today, and we need to come up with concrete pledges or concrete agreement by next week to move things forward.
All right, we'll be checking in with a lot of our kind of different correspondents again tomorrow. Well, I guess again on Monday. But thanks so much for all of this geographical update. It really adds a little bit of a important kind of geopolitical understanding to these negotiations. So Anna, just any updates? Do we have a new text already?
Nope, not.
All right, so it seems like there might be some delays in getting that newest text out. Unfortunately, we don't have Teeny Smith with us this morning to give you the wonderful the messaging update with a London accent like this. Yes, but
This is why your dad thinks you're funny.
Yeah.
Because you have the worst London accent in the world. It's hilarious.
well, but otherwise, I heard there was a lot of kind of coverage overnight. Anna, were you able to pick up on any kind of key stories that really stood out for you?
As you said before, it's basically finance and differentiation. And there was a lot of talking about 1.5. I don't know if it's me and I'm biased, but maybe the media are picking on that. We will see. Maybe that helps. And the pages of the text, for sure. We are super concerned about the pages.
I think there is a sense that the world is changing. That the business world is shifting. That the transition to 100% renewables is inevitable. The question is how fast. It's not will it happen anymore. It's how fast will it happen. And what we need out of Paris, and I think this is the messaging that maybe we need to echo. So we're seeing that in the news, but what we maybe need to emphasize is that we need to speed that transition to renewable energy, and to bolstering climate resilience. We're obviously seeing climate change already have huge impacts on people. And then there's also a sense of growing pessimism in coverage. So I think every round of negotiations we've said progress is being made, but there's concern over pace. Honestly, I don't think there's a single. I've been to like 17 of these things.
Is that like a template that they just throw out kind of on the fourth and seventh day?
It's on the daily program. At this point, we will be making progress, but it'll be going too slow. So, but we need more ambition. So basically, negotiators are. I mean, and this is going to be emphasized today. There's a UNEP adaptation gap report coming out. We've already seen a lot of talk about the mitigation gap. Negotiators are handing up a text to ministers that could, because it doesn't have this architecture that's strong, that's going to let us ramp up emissions, that could lock us into a 3 to 4 degree world. And without delivering on the resilience piece, without delivering that architecture, they're not doing the job. So there's a clear gap, and we need to put the mechanisms in place to scale up climate action, and that's something that we definitely want to send to ministers. I think there is that pessimism out there in the media, and it's for good reason. At the same time, we need to call out the blockers. So Saudi Arabia, I mentioned before, their negotiators are being terrible, and that's ridiculous. Saudi Arabia has they're doing incredible things on renewables at home. They're moving really quickly to diversify their economy and transition to clean energy at home. They are one of the wealthiest countries per capita in the world. They could do so much more. There's so much potential there. So it's insane what we're seeing. I think it is an embarrassment, and not deserving of the people who live there, who have so much potential. And we're also seeing lots of other blockers. A lot of developed countries pushing back on the confidence that we need, or on the pieces of the text that'll give us confidence that there means implementation. So we're going to call out this whole thing as a charade if we don't get that architecture, if we don't get this resilience package. I think there's a growing frustration among civil society that if ministers don't pull this out, obviously negotiators haven't been able to do the job. If ministers don't fix it, if they don't deliver, we're going to call this thing as a charade, as a failure.
All right, we're going to cross over for actions just now, and finally, there were a lot of hands in the audience for actions before. Where are those hands now? Who's got an action plan today? Oh, we have a few at the front. I think I missed. I'm going to go to Annabelle first. You were one of our, I guess, our voices from the audience before. And will you be raising your voice today?
So this is not complete action press conference. It's basically how issues to care about. That's going to be and action choose.
Is Younger going to say disappointing?
In front of all three, it's not like to make a swimming competition, and there will be flow running to the swimming competition, and a very nice song, and well, you watch the awards after the race and everything.
What's the message and what are the tactics for
well, all the hashtags and information is here. So the hashtag, the main hashtag is coming, and then you have 0 by 20 and 1.5 as it's like its own long-term goals.
Sounds like. And do we have any swimming pools planned? Is it like a little kind of thing, or just kind of like chairs and people swimming on the chair? Yeah, could still be fun. If you can get one of those blow-up play pools, I really enjoyed them as a kid, and like could be fun as well. You can action as well.
I'm Veronica from Plan for the Planet, those who came with 5 tons of chocolate to COP, and we are having an action today at 2 p.m. with the message, clean the air by planting trees and keep the ground. We have big elastic loops where people can lie in. It's used in education and relaxation, so it's similar to yoga, some relaxing activity, and you are more than happy and welcome to join. We are meeting at 1:30 at the Red Eiffel Tower, just everybody knows where it is. So come and have fun and a chocolate afterwards.
All right, guys, don't forget, Downward Dog 1:30. Deborah, do you have a message for us?
I do. We also have an act at 2 p.m. It's, I forget where, I'll tell you in a second. It's a crew battle or an MC battle. We have a little thing to call people. We'll send it through email. It will be a battle to show that you have the solution and the delegates from our
All right. I saw one hand over here. Let's pass to the front.
So kind of a similar note that you had. We're also going to have an actions on human rights, where I will be we'll be ripping apart Article 2.2. We actually have made one article of cardboard. We're also gonna question the motives, like the blocking of Saudi Arabia. So I will stand with a sign that says, "I negotiate for protecting oil export profits," and a delegate from Marshall Islands will stand next to me saying, I'm negotiating for my people's survival. So we just want to show that contrast, why people are here to negotiate. So we will have this action at 1, so it's in 2 hours outside Hall 4. And if you want to join, we're gonna have a mic check to amplify the voices. You can join us at 12:30 outside Observer Room 1. Does that make sense?
All right, well, oh, Marcelo, yeah? Excuse me, guys. So just coming through. Marcelo, do you have an update on that Brazilian action?
Yeah, the Engagement Actions will be in front of the Hall 4.
Okay. So it sounds like we have an action at 1, action at 1:30, action at 2, press conference at 4, and finally, Brazilians, get your act together, guys. Is it at 2:30 or 1:30? 2:30, okay.
Hello, I'm Lisa from Plant for the Planet, and we have a performance at 2 p.m. in front of the Eiffel Tower. We have...
So we've already had this announcement just now. Yeah, just now, but it was a really great announcement, and I think a lot of people will be coming. Is it going to be really fun?
Yeah, it's very colorful. It's big bonbon. It's elastic.
We heard that. It was great. We did just now. Yeah, no, it was great. It sounds really fun. Yeah, down at the Red Eiffel Tower, right? Oh, Downward Dog, right? Like with. Yeah, okay, great. So thank you so much. We have actions, it seems, at 1:30 maybe, definitely an action at 1, an action at maybe 2:30. At 2:30, man. Okay, go to the action at 2:30. All right, and then we have an action at 3 as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to close from here. This has been a great Daily Tick. Thank you so much for joining every day this week. We're going to take a break tomorrow. Make sure you go to church or go to relax with your family or go and relax on the CN. We have a morning off tomorrow morning, and then I'm sure in the afternoon you have plenty of things to do. And then we'll see you all again on Monday morning, 10:15 from this room, or whatever time it is back home. It could be 8:15 p.m., it could be 7:15 p.m., it could be any time with 15 at the end, or a.m. or p.m. also associated with it if you use those time zones. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you on Monday.